sky, a maze in the crowd below.
The following presentation From the Music Store is brought to you by WBNJ.
Today, we're pleased to introduce Mavis Jennings, who is a performer in Cirque du Soleil's Quidam and Varekai. Mavis, thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How does one join the circus? It's one of those things that, like, people don't think can happen, but it happens.
Well, Cirque du Soleil is, I feel like it's in its own category.
It is.
It's kind of like if you join the circus, I'm like, oh, it's like that's like going to Walmart, and it's like, oh, I'm in Cirque du Soleil. Well, that's like going to Target.
I think of Cirque du Soleil. I think of Cirque du Soleil as avant-garde movement theater.
Yeah.
Utilizing
well
acrobatics in order to sort of lift the interest even more.
Is surreal a word? That's how, when I've seen it several different shows, and it seems very surreal to me. It's like if Dolly could come to life and do something.
Yeah, it's like that non-realism that includes all of those masters, from the Dada movement to Dali to I'm trying to think of this guy, the floating bowler cap painting, Miro. This piece that was inspiring to Franco Dragone, who for me was the director that put Cirque du Soleil on the map, and I'm not the only one that feels that way, I'm sure. His touch and his whole aesthetic was so magical. And he began, the troupe began as street performers in Montreal that sort of associated themselves with a rock and roll band, and they were doing sort of summer stuff with kids and so on and so forth, and they sort of just kind of put together a little show and decided to risk it all, got a loan and took it to Santa Monica. And when they got to Santa Monica, there was even my old friends that had been there since the beginning told me that, we had to sign papers saying, if we go belly up, we have to make our own way home and we can't sue. That's how far the gamble was embedded. And they won. They won the gamble. They became like the darling of Santa Monica Pier. And from there, they put that show in Las Vegas and in the Big Top in Las Vegas, and then made another show. And then by the time I got on Cirque, they had 3 Big Top tours, and I believe 2 shows in Las Vegas, maybe one on the way. But they were still quite small, world renowned, but still on the more boutique side of performance.
I'm looking here. So Quidam was the first show you did, and you were on that from 98 to 03? Does that sound right? Yes.
And then I was transferred to Varekai, and I was on Varekai for the rest until May of 2016. Yeah, Cirque du Soleil ticked a lot of boxes for me. I always wanted to travel and see the world, and there was no better way to travel and see the world than to be on a Cirque du Soleil contract as far as I was concerned, because you could go to a city and just be there for 4 months. So you really got a chance to what's it like to live in Sydney for 3 months, And in the early days, actually, Jason, they had, when they would transfer, say, from North America to Australia, to stay on that theme, everyone would be on vacation for 3 months for the kit to move and to go through customs and the whole lot. And so you had that sort of assurance of the job coming up, which helped you to spend money. You know what I mean? And I did some of the most outlandish trips during that time, I found myself in Positano, Italy, and I thought it would just be a couple days, couple nights, and I ended up staying there for nearly the entire break. I was in the city.
Wow.
I couldn't leave. It was just so perfect, because I know it won't be even nearly the same as that magical moment, that Brigadoon moment when I was there during that period. But so that was some of the cool aspects of being on tour with Cirque, were those breaks.
So I just have so many questions. So you were in Sydney. You're in Sydney. I can imagine it's a ton of work. You're in a whole costume, right? You've got makeup. You're a master of ceremonies. You're a vocalist. I don't even know where to begin. The first question is, how long does it even take you to get ready to go out and perform?
You should spend a nice 45 minutes on your makeup. I mean, there were times where I could rifle through it, but it never really looked that good. So, and then we would get done with that. Maybe we'd go do a sound check, which would last, just check the lines, or if there was a problem with one of the songs the night before, the band leader might want to practice a certain aspect of a song. If something isn't working, then sound check could be a lot longer. Could be a real problem. Moving that equipment around, had its issues, and those sound. I gotta say, the sound crew on all of the Cirque shows that I was part of, they were hard, man. They were hard, gritty. They were the hard workers. I was not the hard worker. Those guys had to get everything set up and repair and working. They had to know their stuff and be able to work on the fly. And because there was a lot of, it could mean their jobs. There was a lot of money coming in per show, and there was a certain quality that was meant to be, arbitrated by the artistic director and the technical director, and so it was they were in a pressure cooker there. And so you do sound check, and then maybe after sound check, we had a restaurant, a kitchen that would normally make a dinner if you wanted to eat a dinner. I normally like to sort of eat, as a singer, eat something after the show. And then go do the show, then come back, take the makeup off, get on your bicycle, ride to your corporate apartment, and do the same thing the next day.
So you're in apartments. You guys aren't in hotel rooms during these, because I would imagine that'd be pretty expensive because you're long term.
Yeah, I don't know what Cirque does these days, because I know that a lot of things have changed about the company, and like everything in life, certain things, when a company starts, they spend a lot more money than what they do once they've sort of ironed out all the kinks. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not sure, but back in those days when I was there, it was as if money was being set on fire sometimes. The kind of privileges that they gave us as artists, and parties, and just craziness, bonuses, and it was pretty wild. But they would travel bicycles for us, and I love riding a bicycle in almost every place except for the States that we would go to. It was very bicycle friendly. I would normally, if I could, I would ride my bicycle to and from the site. It was a great way to wind down, great way to warm up, and a great way to wind down at the end of the night, And it was corporate apartments for the most part, and, every country would have their different things. I mean, obviously, but it all depends on the venue, When I toured in Russia, for instance, we were always just staying in 4 and 5 star hotels. It was all hotel kind of.
During your years with Cirque, did you play a number? You mentioned you were a singer. So did you play a number of roles throughout the years that you spent with the show, or were you always the same role?
Yeah, on the first show, Quidam, I was the singer of the show. And on the second show, Varekai, I played a character and who was essentially the patriarch or the priest of Purgatory. And I was the singer of the show, the male singer of the show. There was I should say that too. I was the male singer on Quidam, is because there was a child singer, or a sort of an Alice in Wonderland-esque child artist that I would sing duets with and support, sometimes sing background vocals for them. Now on Varekai, I had a person who was equally, my same age or adults, we were contemporaries, and she would have her solos and I had my solos, and then there were songs that we sang together. But I always, on those 2 shows, essentially I had 2 roles at Cirque du Soleil in 2 shows. I didn't do multiple roles in those shows.
So you're watching, there's this intermix between the visual elements, the credible music, the acrobats, the clowns, but during a performance, I can't imagine that the performers, meaning the acrobats and that sort of thing, the clowns, are always going to be 100% in sync. Are you up there? Is somebody conducting the band be like, no, this guy, he needs a little bit more time to climb up to the trapeze, so hit that. We're going to repeat measures 8 to 16. How is that all going on? And how do you know? Because you're walking out, you're often at the edge of the performance area. You're not on stage with the band, who happens to also be in costume at the time. So just how that gets coordinated, to anybody who's been a performer, it's like, that's a feat. I mean, that's like a circus feat in itself that is completely transparent to the audience. They don't catch any of that.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Honestly, okay, I'm going to be honest. Before I started with Cirque, I have no idea how they did it, because and there's another logistic that I'll bring up too. But like when I started, they were beginning with this new technology called earbuds and belt packs and wireless microphones. This is like new, and they had the wireless microphones, but they had no ability to sort of like do like the monitors that way. And so the singers would have to purposefully sing ahead of the beat because of the bounce back of the sound reflection that they were getting.
Whoa.
I know it's insane. And I met a lot of those singers, and they are incredible freaking musicians. So that's probably why they were able to do that. But when I came in, I had earbuds, belt pack, and our band leader would call the show to. They would call the music to the show that was occurring that they could more clearly see on their monitor system, which gave them a couple of angles normally, like the main, like right on front, and maybe one side, for certain acts that had like, you wouldn't really get much if somebody's coming right straight to the camera and coming back. Like, where are they in the spectrum of time, right? So you needed a side shot, and then the band leader would like time it and trois cat. Like that's where we're going into the section, because it has to happen right when they achieve that climactic position, right? And so as singers, we would have to like be able to very much so, be able to count and get in the moment. And also too, it was a lot of times it was made up language. The Varekai was based upon a Romany dialect, and Quidam was based upon a Latin dialect, and so it was getting in and also sort of like, doing it with such a finesse that it sounded like you were actually singing something.
And, well, that's another real question I have. The music, to anybody who hasn't listened to it, I really strongly suggest that they do, and we'll be playing some underneath. But it has this global humanist feel to it. It sounds familiar, but they are either, and to me as a listener, variations on existing languages or made-up languages. So the first question is, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the different dialects required for an imaginary and then language? And then coupled with that, while people are doing things, there's a lot of oohs and ahs that you'll hear a singer just kind of toning through.
Yeah.
So, and Are you just at that point? Are you just riffing, or is it like jazz where you're allowed to like do your own little riffs while he climbs up there?
Yes, and sometimes you might have to buy some time with something, to like make up some kind of thing to help them, or maybe they dropped the rope, or whatever, So so there was that element, but the other thing is that there was a certain amount of improv in some of the songs and a certain amount of fixed in some of the songs, and you had to. We all did the shows so many times that we really had those things anchored inside our being, let alone our brains. And but starting off on a show, it took me 2 years to get my feet on that show. And I was surprised that they kept me, because, man, I had some horrible, horrible shows on Varekai, especially in the first year I was on it. I was so inconsistent. Quidam was so much easier musically. The music was easier. Also, they were composed by, Benoit Jutro, who composed Quidam, is very melodic and very, his stuff sort of has like a very romantic melodic bass. So it's something, it was intuitive that way for me as a singer, where Violin Karate, her music for Varekai was very rhythmic and very, I would say like, Eastern gypsy, and something that was way outside my, because I wasn't educated as a singer at all. I don't even know how I became a singer, quite honestly. I don't. Other than the fact that maybe I just didn't play an instrument, and then I was like the singer of Sidecar Jones, and then like some ignoramus thought that I can work at Cirque du Soleil because I like Cirque du Soleil, and then they hired me, and it was like, oh, I guess I can do this, and then I did. I don't really know.
When you started, did they give you like, hey, here's the score, read this, good luck with it? And you're like, oh, boy, I don't know how to read music. Like, what happened?
Yeah,
how did you pull that off?
They did that. See, Violin had her stuff written, and Benoit, they gave me a cassette tape. It was so much easier. You helped me get this gig.
I did?
Yes.
Oh,
Do
do I
you
get a
don't
commission or
remember?
something?
Well, no. When I auditioned, came to your studio, and they gave me a cassette tape that had the music on one side and then the music and the voice on the other. And they wanted me to put my voice on the music, and we recorded at your studio. And I sent it to them, and then they didn't hire me. They said, "Oh, we hired somebody else." And I was working like painting. I was like kind of like in a crisis, like life crisis moment at that time. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I remembered my only creative outlet would be to come home to my 4-track cassette tape machine and to redo that audition piece over and over again. And every week I would send a new cassette to the casting people. And it turned out that the guy that they had hired didn't work out, and they called me and pulled my file out, and apparently cassette tapes plopped all over the table. Yeah. And so they were kind of impressed by that, and the guy that was the trainer picked up a bunch of the cassettes, and he said he drove home later. He told me that I was driving home, and I put one cassette in, and I thought, that sucks. Threw it in the back of the car, put one in. No, that's not it. Put it in the back of the car, put another one in, and it was like, that's it. That's it. And so, I guess, doing it over and over again was bound to sort of get me into the pocket or into the zone for that fella. And, so they had me come to the studio and do a proper session audition, and then away we went.
Well, I have to do a plug. So, that's something that comes up with students a lot when I say, well, okay, you finally got it down. You can play something. Does that mean we stop? It's like, no, now that's when the work begins. Now you do it 100 times. Now you do it 1,000 times.
Yeah. It was a little bit weird probably for them that this guy keeps sending cassette tapes. I'm sure I probably sent her 30 at some point, It would have been so much less easy to ignore people than it is today. And today, somebody sends you an email, you don't have to open it or whatever, but somebody sends you a tape, it's like a thing on your desk,
Yeah, you got a package, a physical package, yeah. Well, that's there's the old stories, bands would send CDs or records to the labels, but in a pizza box, and you'd have to open it because somebody just delivered a pizza box.
That's a great idea. I wish I would have thought of it.
Oh, again! I thought this was pepperoni and sausage.
Anchovies. Who puts anchovies? Oh, that's great. So getting back to the shows.
Shows.
Can you, just so I have something to play for the listeners out there, do you have a piece or two from each of those shows that you either found that you emotionally really connected with, or that you found challenging, that you spent that year trying to get under your belt? When you finally clicked with it, you're like, got it? Were there ones that were just I did that on the first day, but this other one took me a year? What sticks out from those two shows? Any pieces in particular?
For Quidam, it would have been the Tissue Act was the marquee singing piece, that's the video that I shared with you, that from a performance in Monaco. And on Varekai, it would definitely been this piece in the second act called Straps, where these twin Straps artists would be flying around the stage, and the music that VLN wrote was incredibly, my God. Well, first off, it was modal, so it wasn't something that I could understand right off the bat, because for me it wasn't major, it wasn't minor, and I didn't get that. So I would always want to shift some of those very interesting intervals into a major or minor key, which would completely blow the whole vibe, completely blow it. And so I had to do some self-education there. And then the other thing was that it went really low, and it went really, really, really high. It would go up to, which is funny. It's I have a higher pitched voice now than I did then, but my voice was also lower then as well. But it would go up to a high B, which is not necessarily I can we can come to the recording studio and I could pop out of a high B, no problem. But to do it 10 shows a week was really hard. And so that was the challenging one for me on Varekai.
You were talking about technology before, so I'm thinking to myself, I can imagine that we now live in a world where if you're doing 10 shows a week, and I'm not saying Cirque does this, but you're doing a production that's on the financial level that Cirque du Soleil grew into, do you leave that to chance? In other words, do you start using tracks then? Like, Mavis is a little scratchy today. He's just going to sing along with the track. Or, that one Pete part where that B kicks in. That's a B's not an easy note to sing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, my eyes, nobody can see it on the radio.
It's not the worst note as a one-off, but it's when it's like you're exhausted, like you're in, let's say when we were in Tokyo, I always think of Tokyo because we were always doing 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 every week in Tokyo. And at some point, like you'd get to the second show on Saturday, and like you could hardly get to the stage, let alone sing when you got there. You know what I mean? And so like I had a hard time like getting up to those notes, and my band leader would allow me to sort of like, adjust the melody a little bit. A lot less it was a bit anticlimactic, but it was something I could manage without, cracking. No, but the owner of the company, Guy La Liberté, it was very important to him that the music was live and that there was no later, of course, you had samples because that became like a fashionable to have those drum loops going and stuff like that. But for the most part, those would just be triggered, but with also live hand percussion and drums. So it wasn't like they were skipping out on the drums. And the singing was meant to be done live. Later, when the Ableton Live came along and you were able to sort of trig things, if a singer was sick, literally like lost their voice, they could trig certain songs and then just have the singer walk about the stage and just sort of gesture. and it wasn't ideal, and it never really sounded that good, quite honestly, but it was better than nothing. And it was also quite rare. I mean, at least for Isabel Karate and I, we were able to keep our voices going, so it was quite rare that we pulled into that triggering voice thing, but it did arrive with the technology like later in my tenure at Cirque.
So this whole thing, to somebody who probably has never seen Cirque, it might seem a little kind of crazy. If your background is more of a musical theater background, and you see a musical theater show, you're getting the same thing night after night. Everybody has to hit their mark, and what you're describing is there's room for improvisation, but it's actually what you're describing. It's kind of encouraged because you were describing you've got acrobats, they're doing their thing. And if certain things aren't going, the entire thing has to pivot. Was that something that ever caused a major problem where maybe somebody wasn't quite getting that message?
So I didn't want to ask that question, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, was there a case where you were playing and somebody fell? Like they do some pretty scary stuff there. So like I think your point is you have to be able to.
Yeah, or they're just going for it again. It's like,
We had accidents on our tours. Those things happened, it's live. So like mistakes happen, but I would say like most of the dangerous things that occurred to artists on tour happened when they were off the show, like, partying, you know what I'm saying? Like late at night, that's when almost all of the issues came during those periods and not during the show itself. Cause everybody's so focused. I mean, you get to the show, especially once you start doing it, your body just knows, like, it's just like my body would just get up from the couch and start walking to the stage and I'd be, oh yeah, that's right. My cue's coming up. Like my body knew to take me there. And also there was a large attention towards like creating an atmosphere for the audience that's combined with a certain sense of the culture where we were performing and a sense of like now, like what is this time right now? What's happening in the world right now? What's happening in this culture and how do they react to this moment right now? What kind of atmosphere can we provide for them to lift them? And everybody would buy into that. And I would say we were screened at the studio to be people who would buy into that they did certain funny, funky things during our training there to sort of weed out people who would like roll their eyes at certain things like that. Like they would just tend to not be showing up a couple of weeks later,
Could you give an example of what one of those things might have been?
My favorite story is one of our clown trainers would tell the same story every time we were in movement class. At some point, he would tell this story that lasted around 10 minutes long. It wasn't, the class I think was maybe an hour and a half long. But he would tell the same story about when he was a boy and something about buying apples. Is very French. You can almost hear a violin going, and how there was a woman who was crying and she was so beautiful. And I looked at her and I said, I want to marry this woman, but I was just a boy. And I said to her, lady, one day she came and I came to her and I said to her, lady, it's okay to cry while buying apples. And she touched my face and kissed my forehead. And I did not wash it for many, many weeks. So this, like a story like this, he would tell. But then he would tell it the next class. And then he would tell it the next class. And then we would be almost done with the class after that. And then all of a sudden, before you leave, I want to tell you a story. And he would tell it again. And then he would tell it again. And then, like, we would train 5 days a week. So, like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every class. Again and again. At one point, we're sitting. He goes with the story, right? And so, like, you know, someone, like, you know, next to me might be, like, doing this. Like, looking. Clearly, this man's lost his mind, right? And then one point, like, you know, it got to the point where, like, you know, he goes, and there's something I want to tell you. People, audible gasps, like, oh, God. Maybe something like that. Or sometime, I remember one fellow, like, slammed to the floor with his hand. He slammed his foot. At this point, and Reed, the teacher, he was, like, looking at fire. Like, his eyes, the way they would glaze over, and he had this beautiful hair that kind of stuck up. And, you know, I'm so envious of people with hair because I'm bald. But he'd like pull his hair back like this, and when he would talk, he would like look forward as if he was like hardly looking at anyone. Like, you would really feel as if he wasn't seeing you, even though his eyes were wide open. So people slowly, with impunity, felt as if they could make these gestures and make these sounds without him knowing. Cut to, we go away from the holiday break. We come back, and there's like literally like 12 people missing. Like, where are they? Well, you know, my story about the apple, you know, if someone cannot listen to a story that takes 15 minutes to tell, how can we expect them to tell a 2-hour story, 10 shows a week? It's not going to work.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was coming, and I'm glad that that was it, because otherwise I feel like I would have like been going insane.
I probably
or something.
gave it away when I said they did these little things. And meanwhile, like, I think I've just probably more inside. I thought, oh, he's ill, you know. But
that's why you didn't get kicked off, because you had such empathy for him, like this poor man.
So. But I don't know. There was also something about, like, you know me, Jason, to know that I am kind of like a child a little bit, you know. That's just my personality. And there was something about it. Like, I was so thrilled just to be in Montreal, to be hearing this guy. He could have told me that damn story 5 times in a row every day. I wouldn't have given two shits about it. And I wouldn't have. Because he was so charismatic, too. Like, he was really beautiful to see, and the way his voice and so, like, I got caught up in it. And so I'm the kind of person that can tell the same story over and over again, obviously. For me, it was never like people say, well, you did over 5,000 shows at Cirque du Soleil. And I say, well, not really. Like, I did one show at a, you know, it's like that old cliche, but it's not. I mean, I did one show at a time. And quite honestly, I did one breath, one note at a time. Because, like, to sing, you got to place the note, you got to breathe right, you got to find the really nice vowel that's going to shoot it properly and make it sound really delicious. And just, you know, spent my time just doing that one moment at a time. And it turned out that it was those many shows. But, you know, if you'd sat me down and said you're going to sing 10,000 shows, I would have just jumped off a bridge.
Well, the picture that he was painting was definitely that he was alive in that story every single time he told it, and that's exactly what he needed you to be. And the thing is, Cirque du Soleil comes off as, it's not just, I'm not just watching an acrobat, I'm not just listening to a singer. This entire thing is alive, and I'm experiencing it as it's happening. So, and that's my takeaway.
And it makes me wonder, when you were doing all this, did you feel more like a performer or an actor versus a musician?
Yeah, I felt more like an artist, quite honestly, because I was included in the creation of my role, how my character moved, worked, how he sounded, how he interacted with the show, the kind of what's like I said, we used Latin, but I had my selected Latin vocabulary that I was able to select myself and put to the task. So yeah, I mean, I felt more like I was helping to co-create the piece, and we would, as all of us, like there was normally like quite large number of artists on a Cirque du Soleil show. We would work as a team, and so yeah, like having the right ingredients as far as like the personalities of the artists was really important at Cirque du Soleil in order to make sure that the shows didn't implode or become a show that's just people are just phoning it in, that kind of thing. They would go for the right attitude above the right level of talent.
I'm going to take a left turn and ask you a question. So since you said it was based off of Latin and you had your own choice of Latin words to use, was there any point after a show where somebody came up to you and said, hey, dude, I don't know if you know this, but you were just singing about eating a shoe?
No, I never had that. But we had people complain that there weren't translating, like, when you go to the opera and they have the words translated on a projector screen. That was always funny. It's like, why don't you have the translation projected somewhere so we can understand what you're saying?
So then you go out on tour. So what ended with that show? Did the show itself ended? So that's how you got moved to Varekai, or you said that's it with Quidam, I'm done with that? How did that transition happen?
I was walking into work one day in Fukuoka, Japan, and I was told that I was wanted in the artistic director's office, and I went over there and they said, "We're sending you to Varekai."
Okay.
And that was it. And I said, "What?" And they say, "You can say no if you want. You can say no." And I said, well, what if I say no? Well, they said, "Well, we've already hired someone to replace you, so that would mean you wouldn't have a job." So
that's one way to make it happen.
Back to Montreal I went. I packed my bags and hit the road back to Montreal to learn a new show. And I'm grateful I got to do it because it kind of like reset my whole touring life back to square one again, I got to be on a brand new show, cruising through the States, and then...
Do you think that had that not happened and that you'd still be doing that show today?
You're always going to... I feel as if... And I wasn't the only person that would echo this sentiment, but you always feel tightest with the first show that you were ever on at Cirque because it's kind of like that... the first time kind of thing, And when I got into the Varekai, it was a little bit more of a business. Compared to my Quidam folks, we were very much more like circus family, and the Varekai people were like these stars. And of course, I was starting in California, Hollywood, so it seemed even more so ramped up in a way. And it took me a little while socially to like sort of fit myself in. I was still in contact with my Quidam people more while I was doing the Varekai show for a while.
So you've toured all over the place. And then you did a tour in the States, you said?
Yeah. So like both on Quidam, with Quidam I did the United States, Europe, and Japan. Then I was transferred to Varekai, and then I did the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Europe for that was a very long European tour. And then we went to then we went to Asia. We went and we played lots of spots over in Asia, from Philippines to, Korea and so on and so forth. And then we took the show back to South America and did like a South American tour. Then we did a Russian tour, and that wouldn't happen today. And then I think when I got to Russia, I was sort of like at this place where I was thinking, I think this is over for me. And they were like, yeah, but we only have like 2 more years to go. And I was like, because they were going to close the tour. And I said, well, maybe we could give somebody else an opportunity to get going here, because I was really done. And it wasn't like I hated the show. It wasn't like, it was just kind of like, when you sing a show 4,000 times, at some point it's like, God, I got to freaking sing something else, or I got to do something. I have to do something else.
Earlier, you mentioned that you brought in cultural elements and what was going on in their culture then and what was happening now in that area. Did you find that, number one, I guess, how did you do that, but yet also still present the same show? And two, did you find that certain audiences were more receptive to what was going on? Like if you're pulling, were the states not as excited about the show as maybe Europeans were? Like, not to be disparaging toward any place, but did you find that?
Well, Quidam, I felt as if was sort of like Franco's dark, more like very dark show. I don't feel as it went over as well in the States as it did in Europe and in Japan. Quidam was freaking huge. The Japanese people loved Quidam. They were crazy about the show. And it ticked all their boxes, that darkness. And what is interesting, like they would have 4,000 people come in, 4,000 people go out, 4,000 in, 4,000 out. It always sold out, and they made hardly any noise during the show, and they didn't applaud. We realized as we're all European and Canadian, Spanish, like we all realized how much we fed off their noise and how heavy it felt when they made no noise, especially even at the end of the show. But they would all be like so excited and just.
But you literally, you could hear crickets at the end of the show.
Yes.
Where the cast comes out, you take your bows, and the room is silent.
Yes. Now, you might hear
imagine.
some people think, I know how Americans do it. Let me give them. But it would be very, very, very quiet and polite if there was applause. And we found ourselves feeling as if, God, why does it feel so heavy? I wish they wouldn't have done this. But I think at one point they were our sponsor, Fuji, was trying to put up signs or get the word out that we need applause. We need this sound.
Well, they're a film company. They could just do a picture with people clapping their hands.
I mean, wouldn't it be okay just to have the big red letters, applause?
Oh yeah,
applause.
Or how they have those neon Hello Kitty kind of just a sign with hands smacking each other.
But I heard that, they're starting to applaud, and now it feels weird. It's like, God, you guys can't be happy with it. And then cut to Spain. You would finish a show in Spain. I'll tell you what, they had to put in a different kind of seat. Because on Quidam, people would, at the end of the show, would take the seats and bash them on the ground until the chairs would just fall apart.
They would smash the chairs?
Yeah, because they were so happy. And cut to say in Sevilla, they would do this applause. There was a pop, 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 very flamenco, and they would do this applause.
And in Madrid, you got a soccer chant.
Yeah. In Madrid, they would throw red vermouth at us. No, but in Spain, they would do that applause, and they would just do it, and it would go on and on. I'm talking 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It was humbling, of course, it was wonderful, but it was incredible, the kind of energy you get from that as a performer. Now, in German, obviously, very stoic, very into their Cirque. They had a very stern ownership of. We have a long tradition of seeing Cirque du Soleil. And they would be very quiet during the entire show, polite applause. And at the end, they would go crazy, So it was very polite throughout the entire piece. And for us, too, the way you would perform in Spain would be invited to be a little more... and you would never do that. You would never do that. How
would you describe that? What he just did for radio people?
You would a little bit of movement, a little bit of shoulders. A little bit more when I was in Monaco, it was considered
gritting his teeth a little bit.
Your pop singers like Tom Jonesy, you know what I mean?
Right, okay.
Whoa. And then cut to in Germany, it would be more operatic and more operatic,
more Wagnerian. So this question, Jeremy is going to probably roll his eyes, and he won't find it at all surprising. But so you traveled the world. So what I want to know is best country to eat in.
I had some of the most freaking surprising, amazing dinners in France, Paris, Lille, in Bordeaux. Oh my God! And also, I guess the wine is part of it, right? But,
right. Yeah.
But I've had, also Italy. Yeah, knocked my socks off. I love, maybe that's just my palate, of course, There's nothing wrong with a nice frickin' Wiener Schnitzel and a big old freaking, beer in Munich either.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
I'll take France though. That's fine. You don't have to explain yourself away on that one.
Yeah.
So you came after your Varekai run. You came to this conclusion that you weren't going to last the last 2 years. That you were going to transition out.
Yeah. It was hard. I wanted to go back to the beginning of the ride, but not continue on it. If that makes sense.
What were you thinking when you walk away from that? Because I can imagine, as a musician or as people that are performers, those are great gigs, and we all get to a point in our life, I guess, where things change. Like for Jeremy, like you started having a family, and that changed your view of things. I know that obviously you have a family as well. Did that factor into it? Was it really the creative decision?
They would travel my family with me, and my daughter was born on the road, and they had a school and for the kids, and so my daughter had friends on tour, and so that wasn't as much of a factor. I mean, me leaving was, and I honestly I felt this way a solid 2 years before I left. To be quite honest about it, I was done. I was done doing that show. And I still freaking nailed it out for a couple more. I guess that's the farmer background in me. You got to feed the calf barns, feed the calf and milk the cows and just do the duty. And but artistically, I wasn't connected to it anymore. I didn't have a passion for it, and my passion was for doing a good job. But that was pretty much the beginning, middle, and end of that. And so I resigned, and I'm grateful I did, because the new guy that they came in he shot such an energy into the show because he was so excited. And I should have probably left a couple more years before that and given him that other 2 years, quite honestly.
Well, that's very noble of you to be thinking of the group over the self.
Well, I was, well. I think when you think of others, you're actually... Yeah. I mean, the truth is, I think when you think about others, I mean, this is really going to sound like, here I am, Mr. Rogers, but it's just true. When you think about others, you are thinking about yourself, because like when you do something right for other people, it ends up being the right thing for you in the end. It might not look like it right now, but you'll see it later. Like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did that. It's a tried and true experience that I've had in my life, and I believe it's real.
So when you resigned and you said, okay, I'm done, and you wrapped it up, did you just take 3 months, 6 months to just detox? And then, of course, I am just so nosy, but it begs the question, too, like, so you were on road for all those years. I mean, you must have been collecting a paycheck, but they were feeding you, and you had hotel rooms and stuff. Yeah. So were you just banking all that money for 10, 15 years, and then you're like, okay, I can at least take a couple of months off now and not stress it?
Yeah, there was an array of things. I did some investments that didn't go so well, like what would happen to someone who never had money in his life, right? There was some other things where I did some investments that did okay, but the bottom line is that I was able to come off the road and sort of like, I would say during that period, what I did was drink alcohol a lot. Because I bought this house and I just sat in my back area and I drank wine and just like stared at the sky, and I felt for the longest time like my life's over. All the fun times are behind me. You know what I mean? Had that moment, and then I woke up one day and I thought, okay, what's next? And I found out that I'm going to go to grad school. And then this journey appeared, and then that got me on the straight and narrow, and or at least like straight enough to get some freaking schoolwork done. Grad school is nothing to scoff at, and so like gave me a new direction, and that like now my thing is like been full on theater. I've like directed 7 shows, and I have an acting studio. I have 12 actors in it that I train, and I kind of freaking love it. I love it. And so like that's what I've been up to. And this summer up at Interlaken is going to be a freaking blast, like training acting, like doing the Michael Chekhov and all this stuff that I had the opportunity to learn first at Cirque du Soleil, and then augment with my grad studies and extra training on the side since I've been sort of at this new life. And
To be clear, so you did graduate work in theater or acting? What exactly was your graduate work in?
well, like total Mr. Magoo, like I decided to. I was told we bought this house. I had no idea that Kent State was near here. Okay. All of my colleagues, when I did go to grad school, they had been scoping out this school for like 2 years. And my wife had a friend that lived in this area. I was still on tour, but it was arena in Russia, and I couldn't take my family with me to Russia on the arena tour there. So I decided I'm going to buy a house. You guys are going to go in the house. Mabel's going to go to a real school. We're going to be a real house people kind of thing. And so we got the house. They got in it, and I still had like about a year and a half left on my contract. And so when I got off of the road, I was like, what am I going to do now? Like I said, and then I found, oh, yeah, there's a college. Oh, it's only 10 minutes away. Oh, and they have a theater. And they're doing auditions on Tuesday. And it was like Friday. Typical how my life works thing. And so then I was in that, and I really loved it. There's so much theater. Northeast Ohio is a big theater pocket over here. And they have this outdoor theater called Porthouse that I got to do shows at in the summer. And, I've done shows around, but I've really got I think I'm really into the directing thing. I like to direct shows. That's kind of where my passion is right now. And I also like teaching acting.
Were you doing musicals? Or were you doing dramas? Did you, because everybody said, hey, you were a Cirque du Soleil guy, so you're going to be in musicals.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Porthouse. I was in musicals, but I was normally like, a character role that would just come out at the end and maybe just sing with everybody else. I'm not a leading man now, at this stage of my career, and I had a really good fun time with that. So they do musicals there, but the shows that I've directed have been primarily musicals, just 2 straight plays out of those 7. And, Hedwig and the Angry Inch was one of the shows that we put up last year. Toxic Avenger. Have you ever seen The Toxic Avenger, the musical?
Takes place in Jersey, right? Like, doesn't everybody in New Jersey have to know that?
Yeah. New Jersey. Oh, you would love that musical.
So, and then in closing, so I first met you when you were a younger man on his way to potentially being in a successful band at the time, and you were doing a lot of the songwriting, and that was always something that you were pretty actively doing. So we are going to when we close out the show, we will play a song, so maybe you can lead into that, and then just give us a little bit, like, are you still writing? Are you still, even if it's just for you, are you still creating music?
I still like to write songs. I made a movement show a few years back that I used all my own original music. I have this nice, like, sort of Nord lead that mixes really well with this old Gibson acoustic guitar that I bought in Japan. And it's like made a lot of sort of like movement pieces with it that have my actors perform in front of. I have a gong that I play. I'm really into my gong because I got it when I was in California. I went to one of those extended savasanas where you get to lay down and they play all the bells and gongs and stuff. So I have a gong that I like to play to sort of chill out to, and I'd like to figure out how to record that. Maybe when I move to New York, because I can never really get a recording that makes it sound like a gong. It always sounds like a cymbal or something.
We'll do a gong session.
Yes. Do you have a gong?
I have a small nipple gong. It's about a 10-inch nipple gong, which I think is from Nepal. Gongs are notoriously expensive for anybody out there who doesn't know. Like, if you want, I've had people come into my other music store and this music store in the past and say, "Hey, looking to buy a gong." I'm like, gongs are like $1,200, $1,500. Like John Bonham smashed the gong at the end of a Led Zeppelin concert, on fire.
Yeah,
those are very, very expensive. So sadly, gongs, like the kind of gong that I personally would really like to have, is a little out of my operating budget.
Well, when I move to New York, I'm going to bring my Atlantis gong over to you. It's considered a solo gong, so it's basically tuned to like 3 different chords, and it's really intense. I'll have to share that thing. Let's see if we can get a recording of it.
for the original stuff, we're going to go out with a piece from Sidecar Jones. So tell us that about it, because that actually, when you said that this is a piece, you would give us a little bit of background, and there's definitely seems like there's a story there. Like this is a song that's, I feel, is coming from the heart of a young man in a bit of a stitch or something. So give us a little something.
That's the funny thing about that song is that, like, in my duties in the band became singing and writing the lyrics, as if like now that's what I do, and so I would essentially write about the things that I think about, or which, as you know, were very esoteric all the time. I don't think I wrote one love song or one song about partying. It was always about like some kind of like ancient Socrates, it's like some kind of like know thyself. At any rate, that's just like that's pretty much all that pours out of me when I try to write. But anyway, that being said, on this piece, I was in Fire Island with my friend Devin, who was basically performing as Cher. And these two drag queens were walking down the boardwalk, and one says, "You can keep all that Tupperware." She said, "No, you can keep all that Tupperware anywhere, B word." And I thought that was the most hilarious thing I ever heard. And then when I came back to the studio, I said, I got to figure out a way of fitting "you can keep all that Tupperware anyway" into the song. I was able to use that line. So really completely not from a life experience. It was just two drag queens yelling at each other.
What I really like about it, because like back in that day, we still had records. So like when you broke up with a girlfriend, you'd be like fighting over like whose CD or record it is. But you just went right to the Tupperware. Which, when you get to be of my age, like that's, that would be the thing.
People ask for that stuff back. It's like, hey, it's like that Seinfeld episode where Kramer gives the homeless guy some food. He goes back. He goes, hey, you got that Tupperware? He goes, no, you gave it to me. He's like, you don't just give away Tupperware.
I got to see that. That's hilarious.
So give the quick rundown, too, on the other solo record you have. Anybody wants to check out your music, they can go to Spotify. They can go to, I think I got it on Google, but lay down the records that you got out there. You've got
every record I do, I call myself a different artist name. So with Sidecar Jones, obviously that's everywhere. And then there's Mavelvis, which is Mavelvis. And I did this album with Cirque du Soleil band called XRNR. There was the album I wrote called Aerial Caveman was the name of the artist. I made a song on there called Did I Did You, where I have recordings of all kinds of Skype calls that I was making at the time, and I made this amalgamation. So I was doing a lot of experimentation on that album.
Mr. Jennings, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure's all mine.
It was great having you.
We're going to close out and enjoy listening to this track from Sidecar Jones.
What do you want from me? 'Cause I'm not here just to cheer you on, 'cause you were not honest. From the start I said get out. Steal anything in the house that you say is yours. You know we built this place together. You can keep all that Tupperware anyway. Hey, 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 it's all insanity, but we're still here. Hey, 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 it's all insanity. Still come a long way from say I never loved you. You know I told the truth. Is that why you never come home? How can you look at me and say I never needed you? Sweet darling, I need you more right now than you'll ever know. Hey, 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 it's all insanity, but we're still here. Hey, 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 it's all insanity. Till we come a long way from, a long way from. I feel strange when you come so prepared. I've come so undone. watch you turn it on, and you're the spy in the night. I'm just another case you phone.